latest one.
And we love your updates. So let's talk about authenticity on LinkedIn and the opportunity for brands. Sean, you've built a strong personal brand through authenticity, subject matter expertise, and trustworthiness. Yusma, I was taking notes. And you're a keen observer of brands, right? So how do you think brands can apply this B2H approach on LinkedIn that usually has worked very well for personal brands? How can brands apply this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because a lot of times we tend to see the brand and not the people behind the brand, right? And like the examples that Mickey was showing as well, like those people are actually working for the brand, and you need to showcase the behind the scenes. You need to showcase people who are making the content. And I think one example that I like, that I personally follow, is Morning Brew. So they are like a news organization, but they do skits where they break down heavy topics, and those are the journalists that are actually telling the stories, and they do it through that skits, and they do it on LinkedIn, they do it on TikTok and all the other platforms as well. So I think that's the best way to do it. You don't have to be Duolingo, you know, you can be just showing behind the scenes.
Amazing. And speaking from the platform side, how does the algorithm reward this authenticity? And what can brands take away from this?
I think it's not even that, I mean, we can go on to talk about, you know, what the algorithm prioritizes, but the algorithm is made up by what all of us do on LinkedIn and the content that we respond to, and showing us more of what we want to see. Authenticity is something that, you know, even if we take LinkedIn out of the picture for the moment, obviously very grateful that you've chosen to focus on LinkedIn today, but even if you take it out of the picture, authenticity is everything now from a brand perspective, because all of us as consumers, we can see through brands that aren't authentic, people who aren't authentic. Being authentic is basically, I am who I say I am. You know, I do what I say I'm going to do. And we have, you know, it's been proven again and again in both consumer decision making and also B2B decision making that, like, we need to know that we're buying and making decisions, you know, from companies who are authentic. So there's sort of a business imperative, if you want to think about it in a selfish way, to be authentic. But on LinkedIn, you know, we see over and over again now that content that is authentic, and when I say that, I mean, you know, a business being more human or a brand being more human. Some amazing examples. Thank you, Mickey. You stole my thunder with Surreal and a few of the other ones. But that gets rewarded not by our algorithm necessarily, but first and foremost by the people who those brands want to connect with. So if maybe the reason that my posts this week have gotten more distribution than usual is, like, people are seeing me looking at the camera and talking maybe for the first time. So, like, that's authenticity. So I think, like, and then, you know, the algorithm rewards things that are being engaged with by the right set of consumers. And on LinkedIn, it's about, you know, knowledge and advice is the #1 thing for the LinkedIn algorithm, or, you know, as much as I don't know that much more about it than lots of you do, just from trying and testing our platform. But knowledge and advice, not necessarily humble brags. Some people's followers might love a humble brag. So if your followers do, keep humble bragging, maybe have a bit more fun with it. But, you know, it's very specific to the, you know, the brand or the individual. But I think, you know, I always would ask any person sitting here wondering what they should post about on LinkedIn or what their brand should post about, what do you want to be known for, you know, authentically, and then post about that. So Sean has an amazing perspective on a number of things: marketing, business, DEI. You know, you post about those things and many other things, but it's like knowing what you want to be known for and then stick to that.
Can I just add on to that? So why your videos have been getting that traction, right? It's also consistency. Like, I think consistency is the key, because some people, they just show up occasionally and then they get hundreds of likes, hundreds of comments, and then they disappear.
It's very true.
And you don't get that kind of engagement consistently, then there's no point in doing that, because it doesn't convert into sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One example, actually, Lyft were mentioned earlier, just from a creative point of view. The CEO of Lyft is a guy called David Risher, and I love following him on LinkedIn because he does post company news and all of those things, but also every so often he drives a Lyft, so I think he does it once a month. And I suppose not too safe for him to take videos of that, but he always takes a picture and tells the story of the passengers he has in his car. And at the end of the journey, he reveals who he is to the passengers. And some of them are like, oh, wow, amazing, you're the CEO of Lyft. And some of them are just like, yeah, I don't care. Am I getting this for free? So David Risher is a good one to follow.
But that's a great example because with that, he's not only talking to his employees, prospective employees, to other C-suite people and people who take Lyft. So he's talking to consumers, his employees, everyone. That's an amazing example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and sorry, just to add on, I think the best example is this week with what happening with Chocolate Finance. Like with the CEO, if you look at his post, he was authentic, he was vulnerable, and it's not a video, it's just text. But he was sharing his, he was apologizing, he was showcasing his mistakes, he was saying what they could have done better. So I think that kind of authenticity needs to show, and the CEO is a best example to do it.
Great example.
Yeah, amazing. Especially in crisis situations, it's a great platform to be authentic and communicate directly because people are not expecting just the standard PR code. They're expecting the CEO, the person behind it, to stand clear. Let's talk about short form video. I saw it's expected to perform 5x an engagement that we get on regular posts. I have an example. Actually, I made one LinkedIn video. I made a few, but one of them was really worked very well, where I talked about 5 ways you should not work with VaynerMedia. That was my best performing LinkedIn.
See, you were having fun.
I was having fun.
You didn't say, here is an official employer branding post on all the reasons you should work for VaynerMedia. You had a bit of fun. There you go.
Exactly. So now, a few years ago when short form content started becoming big, and at that time it was still underpriced attention, a lot of brands were very about it. Like, no, our brand is not about dancing in short form videos. Our brand is not about having fun. Our brand is serious about these things, and we are changing people's lives. And we are now, and then everyone was creating short form videos, and a lot of brands are catching up. We are seeing the same conversation right now on LinkedIn when short form video is such a great opportunity, and brands are a little scared. Any advice for brands on creating content?
Do you want to start on this? Do you want to share
Yeah,
on this one?
I think it's funny. Like I'm starting to see on LinkedIn people complaining about short form videos because they are used to the long form content, right? The words, the photos. But I think it's moving on with the times because and when I first started posting on LinkedIn, did a shout out because we're in VaynerMedia. I was reading Day Trading Attention by Gary Vee, right? And
great book.
They got me started on my creator journey. But I think one thing that he stated in this book, and I'm sure you know this, but one thing he said that the algorithm matters because whether you have 10 followers or whether you have 1,000 followers or 15,000 followers, it doesn't matter anymore. It's the content that matters. So when you create content that speaks to your audience and you write with an audience in mind and with the emotions, then you convert that into sales because like doesn't pay the bill. And I think for me, one thing that I've been doing is cutting my podcast clips into short highlights. And just last week, I was showing you the stats earlier. The clip that I posted had over 500,000 views. And I haven't gotten the views before. So it shows me that short form video, it has a place in the algorithm because, it's short. You can't hide in the video, You have to be authentic, you have to be yourself. Yeah.
I was feeling really good about nearly 3,000 impressions on one of my videos, and then Sean showed me his over 600,000 impressions, and I was like, I've got a lot more to do. But I think I love that you have identified. We rarely get called underpriced at LinkedIn, right? Because people are usually thinking about our CPMs, but. I think in this area there is a huge opportunity, but it's not just about short form video. I think it's too early for us to know what formats of video are going to really be successful and enduring on LinkedIn, but video in all its forms, any brand, you were pointing at consumer brand opportunities early, Mickey, and that's really, really important. Any brand who's not doing some form of video on LinkedIn at the moment is definitely missing out. I think where short form comes in and where the underpriced thing really applies is, how can you get to market quickly with video, particularly in B2B? a lot of brands are not used to yet creating video. They might do it once a year, the big campaign, and then, so one of the areas that is, increasingly more important on LinkedIn is executive thought leadership, and that's like a long and fancy way of saying getting your company leaders and spokespeople to create content on LinkedIn in a consistent way. Video is perfect for that. If you can get people within your company, and I don't just mean the people with C in their titles. AWS is an example of a brand in this region who have used subject matter experts, specialists, women engineers, men engineers as well, but using it as a way to spotlight voices from across the company using videos. So short form videos, a quick way to market. We actually see on LinkedIn at the moment that sort of TikTok level production values and editing is not required on LinkedIn for short form video. And I think that goes back to the authenticity. I'm here, I'm on LinkedIn, you've got your name, I've got my name, I'm not an avatar or a nickname. So at the moment, like, point the camera, make the video, give it a try. And I think, the content is everything. Mickey, again, great point earlier on, remember the professional context. So when we all go to LinkedIn, rarely we go, going to have a scroll through and watch some videos. We're learning, we're connecting, we might be looking for a job. We're in a different mindset. So even if you're using short form video, some brands like dancing, some people like to see dancing on LinkedIn, but think about what do people expect and want to see from your brand, and then make your short form videos about that.
Yeah, another thing I would add is the first time you do it, it's going to be cringe. It's definitely going to be cringe, because before I started my podcast, I was just doing that, taking a phone and just talking into it, and it was definitely cringe. And I think because of, again, day trading attention, like, I was just taking his advice of just putting it out there, and I just started putting it out there, and when you hear your voice, when you look at yourself, it's going to be cringe, definitely, but you improve. So you get the reps in, you improve. Yeah.
Amazing. So the message is to create more and learn from that.
And test, really, like I did in the same week as I did my first, being very vulnerable here, guys. My first video post, I looked back at a post I had done, 2 weeks ago, which was much more the kind of post I would usually make, long form with photos, which is still fine, and LinkedIn will continue to prioritize that because people want to read, quality information on LinkedIn. But they were about the same in terms of, impressions. So just experiment and see what works, and then we'll continue to learn from that and make things work better.
And we talked about influencers and creators, and of course, very important to create your own voice, but working with influencers is also very helpful. As a content creator, Sean, I'm sure brands are talking to you to create more content. What's your message to brands? How can they collaborate with you? Because it's a very different environment. It's not about, okay, this is the product, I want to talk about that product immediately, because they're coming to you for your trustworthiness and authenticity. What would be your message, and how would you like to work with brands?
I think, one of the brands that I'm talking to, they do like 3D creative, like architecture printing. And they were talking to me about sponsoring my posts, like, working with them, sponsoring my posts with their product. And I think one of the things that I tell them is that I need to use a product first before I can endorse it, or before I can tell my followers about it. Because if I don't use that product, then it's not something that I will promote, right? And because my message and my brand is around authenticity and vulnerability, if I talk about something else that is totally off topic, off tangent, then it wouldn't suit the brand. And then another one is that I'm talking to is in discussion with an event organizer, and they want to use like my podcast to promote their event. But again, like if it's not something that I'm comfortable with doing, then I won't do it. So you have to trust the creator to know what they're doing, their audience, and the message that they're trying to prove.
So authenticity is key there as well. And talking about other creations, like there was a fascinating stat in Yusma's presentation, and we talked about it. The employees' influence is 12x of that company. Do you want to talk a little bit more about it, or any examples?
I mean, that stat is about if you leverage your employees, if you were, and I loved the comment about the marketer being the glue that brings all the departments of the companies together, and that's a lot of pressure on marketers, but it is also true, and communications teams as well, really important. You know, that's about how much your employees can amplify the company's voice. I mean, we all know this, but it is a rare company that has actually put the processes in place to empower and enable their employees to do it. And, you know, a few years back, it was all about technology. I'm still a big fan of that, to like, every employee must click this button and automatically post the post from the company, and that is our company strategy. And that didn't really work. Again, there was very little authenticity to that. And it's much more about, you know, Canva is a great example of a company, you know, headquartered and based in this region in Australia, who just empower their employees. You know, it goes with their product, obviously, that they can provide toolkits for their employees, but they sort of say, please, you know, promote what the company are doing on you know, your social channels and in line with your, you know, your job. And then they spot influencers within their employees and, you know, sort of highlight and amplify them. So employees are a huge channel. I mean, the whole area, and I talk a lot of, you know, we mention B2B a lot because that's kind of our core in LinkedIn, even though consumer marketing is starting to really, really develop and explode on LinkedIn. But we really know B2B very well after so many years. And influencer marketing is really growing in B2B. As Yusma said earlier, it's credibility over celebrity, even though you've got Salesforce working with Matthew McConaughey on LinkedIn and Idris Elba and ServiceNow being a unexpected but very funny partnership. But any employee that is going down the path of B2B creators, you know, and influencers from a third-party perspective who haven't got a strategy around their own employees are, I feel, jumping a big step ahead. You know, ideally you'll be doing both, but not overlooking the employee influence is really important.
I think the best one that I can think of is Rob Mayhew. Like, his content on LinkedIn is the best. Like,
do you know he's just, sorry to interrupt, he has just stopped creating content for TikTok.
Yeah,
he's gone
TikTok.
Gone full LinkedIn. I love to see it.
Yeah, and he does these skits where it's like making fun of the employer, employee, and then like 9 a.m. meeting calls and all that, right? And it's so relevant because, like you say, he started on TikTok, but he's now changing the way he does it, but it's still the same format.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you brought up. I love Rob Mayhew's content, and but that's where when we are talking about brands creating and creativity comes into the picture. At VaynerMedia, how we think is like know your audience first, know the platform, because that's where the attention is. Then you know what's happening on the platform and what's happening in culture, and then bring that creativity magic. And Rob knows that. But there is this perceived conservative nature of audience on LinkedIn. Because everyone thinks that on LinkedIn people come to read serious things or long.
I mean, we all go to LinkedIn to download white papers and read them back to front, don't we? Don't we? If we're not applying for a job? No.
Yeah, I mean, but there is this perception among marketers and from the platform side, when you meet marketers and when you meet brands and you observe brands, what would you say to them about this? Because this perception of being serious on LinkedIn is quite opposite to what people are actually consuming.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a real concern. I think, you know, the experimentation thing is really important. Again, I have yet to see a brand who has not decided to trial having a bit more fun with their creative or their content on LinkedIn in a way that's relevant to their company, what the company does and their audience, and not seen success and not been pleasantly surprised and started to push the boat out. Like some of the brands that we heard about earlier started in a much more conservative place and then learned. We tried to feed the industry on this a lot with research. We've got a think tank called the B2B Institute, and we regularly put out research about, you know, emerging trends on our platform, emerging trends in B2B marketing and marketing more generally. So we try and inform the conversation. But it's really not the case anymore. I mean, if you're a CEO and you only are connected to other CEOs on LinkedIn, all you see are boring CEO posts, depending on your industry. Lots of exciting CEOs on LinkedIn. But I think it's a perception that is not true anymore, and the only way to do it is consume more content yourself, create more content yourself, and see what's resonating. But I can tell you, We know now it's not just the jobs, it's just one small part, as you said earlier, of why people are coming to LinkedIn. So just like we all don't, take off our, fun self hats and walk into the office in the morning and say, I'm serious me now, I only want to have serious conversations. It's the same when we're interacting on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we are not in an episode of Severance yet.
No,
Yeah.
I'm only on season 1.
Okay, great, no spoilers for you. Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn used to be a place where you go, like it's been talked about earlier when Mickey said as well, where you go to find new jobs and everything. And a lot of creators that I speak to, who still have a full-time job, their employer are not happy with them posting a lot on LinkedIn, because they feel like they are trying to outshine a company, or trying to look for a new job. So I would say that if you follow my content, I post a lot about my struggles as being a queer person, as being a gender fluid person, and so far I haven't gotten any negative feedback, none. So that says a lot, right? And a lot of people are identifying with me because of. It's funny because a lot of people struggle with authenticity and vulnerability. Like they can talk about it, but to live their life being authentic and vulnerable is something that it takes a lot of practice. So I have people in my DMs telling me about how they struggle with authenticity and vulnerability. I have this, the funniest thing was this woman came into my DM, dropped me a DM and was telling me about how she liked this bisexual man and he wasn't reciprocating the love for her. So I've kind of become the anti-agony in that sense. But it's a lot of misconceptions that LinkedIn is a conservative platform. And I would say everyone is a creator and you can have fun on it. You can create things that no other platform has seen, because at the end of the day, you are writing, right? And whatever you do is still writing. You write an email, you write a deck, it's still writing. And LinkedIn is the best form for long-form content, and you can switch it up with videos, because you still need to write a video script and all that.
Yeah, and I think the conservative and professional are two different things, right? LinkedIn is still a professional social network or platform. We will continue to be that because we believe we're the only ones, filling that role in the world at the moment. So I think you can be professional. You can be there as yourself. Whether if you work for a company, you can be a representative of that company and also a representative of yourself. If you're, a creator or any kind of self-employed person or entrepreneur, you're obviously there to represent yourself from a business perspective. So there is always going to be the professionalism angle, but just like we said earlier, that doesn't have to mean boring, conservative.
Great. We can open for some questions in the audience, but I'd like to invite Mickey back on stage just in case there are tough platform algorithm questions. I can bounce her way.
If there's any LinkedIn algorithm questions, I will be putting them straight to
Those
Mickey.
are for Mickey. Okay.
Hi. So we spoke about vulnerability and authenticity, right now as well. And I actually had a question, Sean. I was there at your event last week around vulnerability. I was just wondering, what is the fine line for brands and individuals to maintain vulnerability on LinkedIn without it backfiring on you as an individual or a brand? What's the fine balance?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you want to show authenticity, right? You don't want to do it for authenticity's sake. So I would say that if you can share as a company, if you can share what are the struggles that your staff face in terms of mental health, in terms of working from home, because those are real struggles and you can't just brush it under the carpet. So those stories like that actually make a difference, because it's what everyone can identify with, and it's what everyone is going through as well.
I'll give the slightly more corporate response as well. I I think it's important for companies to have guidelines around this stuff. So as much as I think it's important, and I mean, by this I mean generally big brands, and those guidelines can be pretty open and designed ideally to empower employees to represent the company, but it is useful for companies to have guidelines around if there are boundaries they don't want employees to cross when it comes to sharing information. But yeah, and corporate communications teams and departments should always be involved in setting those. But otherwise, I think it should be, companies having trust in their employees is a huge, it's a huge way to retaining your best talent, right? Like what you said earlier about being concerned over what employees might post, or I hear sometimes, oh, we don't want to profile our employees because we're afraid they'll get poached. And it's like, that is not how, the workforce of today thinks. They think in the way that is like, if you recognize me as a company, you're promoting me on LinkedIn or you're putting me on a stage, I'm going to feel more loyal to you than if you kept me in the back office hoping that I'd never leave. So I think having guidelines, but also giving people freedom and trust and monitoring is really important.
Like, I think the best example is International Women's Day, we just passed, right? And you go on LinkedIn, it's everywhere. Everyone is posting about it. But what about the 365 days of the year? Like, you should be showcasing your women employees, right? So that can be authentic, that's being vulnerable as well. Like, how do you help new moms come back to the workforce? We don't see that on LinkedIn.
Hi, thanks for sharing the insights. I'm Lavish from Property Guru. Two questions. The first one being, a lot of examples we saw earlier as well, like Duolingo and Surreal and, Lumon Industries. Everybody is kind of leveraging a tonality which is, entertainment, humor, because yes, everybody likes that, everybody is going through the day, doing the grind, and they connect with that kind of things. What is your advice to brands which do not have that kind of personality, Talk about banking as a sector, or investment as a sector. For example, BlackRock. What is your advice to brands like that? How can they shine? What do they need to do to appear on slides like these?
Well, some of them do. So we had a financial services event actually yesterday in Singapore, and on stage we had the head of social media for UOB, and they're doing an amazing job at humanizing UOB as a brand mostly through their employees, but some of it is through their marketing. So, and one of my favorite CEOs that I always mention, and you won't get, it's not like hilarious Duolingo, but John Gray, who's the CEO of Blackstone, the investment company, and all of his executives, like he posts running videos on LinkedIn, and he still talks about Blackstone's business. But so what I say to those brands is, what do you want to be known for? If there are aspects to your company brand, most companies in any sector, particularly in those sectors, they're doing good in some way. They've got a CSR agenda. They've got employees doing amazing things. I think companies who think they don't have anything to share, they're underselling themselves a little bit, because, there is a lot of heart and soul in companies and industries where, we might think they don't have the right to talk about those things. So it'll always go back to testing what works for your audience. But there are very few companies or brands in the world that, again, Surreal Cereal's approach won't be the right tone for an investment bank, but there is humanity